Hello and welcome back to the Football Heritage podcast. I'm your host, Rory Bryce, and today I'm joined by the latest Football Heritage contributor, Jonee Zhao. Jonee, it's a pleasure to finally have you on the show. How are you?
Not too bad. It's an honor to have this opportunity to chat about a special game for us. Obviously better for me, but still.
Yes, this is going to be an episode in two halves. Heartbreaking for me, but very nice and nostalgic and euphoric for Jonee. Just to give you a bit of context, this episode, Jonee reached out not long after we'd set the project up. He got in touch to contribute to our website, which we were more than happy for him to do. Some of his articles have been absolutely magnificent so far. You might already recognise his name. He wrote the Portistas article, which was very, very popular and very good. But myself and Jonee started speaking a little bit more in depth because Jonee is a Porto fan and I'm a Celtic fan. So obviously we started talking about the 2003 UEFA Cup Final, which took place in Sevilla between the two clubs. Mourinho's Porto, O'Neill's Celtic, two teams really at the height of their powers, which of course Porto won. And then we realised, and we kind of had this interesting dynamic because, am I right in saying, Jonee, you went to the game, didn't you?
I went to the game with my dad, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you went to the game with your dad, you were there in person, and you were a little bit older than I would have been at this time. I was 7 years old and watched this game in my house with my Celtic supporting family and my dad, who's a Rangers fan, crowded around the TV. And we realised that in and of itself is quite an interesting dynamic. So this episode is going to be about remembering Sevilla, remembering the game, but it's not going to be a tactical breakdown or an analysis of how the game went. Those have been done to death. It's going to be us recounting our memories of experiencing the run-up to the game, our team's respective runs, how we felt surrounding the fixture, and just the different things that have come about from it so far. And I think that's really the spirit in which we wanted to talk about in this episode, wasn't it, mate?
The idea, because obviously we discussed the fact that talking about tactics, it doesn't really make much sense, especially 21 years later after.
Exactly.
There's no point to it. So it was just better to discuss it as fans and what we can recall of the games and how it matter to us and our friends and family, obviously. Mm-hmm. Although, because obviously we've talked about it, some of your family was probably happy with the score, wasn't it?
Some of them. A couple of them probably were. Yeah, it was just it was such an interesting thing for me, and it's funny because I know that I'd watched Celtic games before this one, and I know I'd watched big Celtic games before this one. And in fact, the first game that I can now remember, really looking back on it, was the Boa Vista game where we played. Obviously, Henrik Larsson scored quite late on in the game, and that was at my house as well. And I remember it being a huge thing, and at the time, it was weird because I knew how big it was, but you're still at that age where you don't really fully understand it, So there's loads of interesting things that we can talk about within this. But before we get stuck into things properly, Jonee, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, obviously born in Portugal, born in Coimbra, which is the home of the oldest Portuguese university. Strong football tradition with Académica. Mm-hmm. They're now facing, I would say, very tough years, a lack of investment, poor management, all sorts of things, really. But I've always been a Porto fan. But around my area, we were the minority, and I would say a very small minority. So growing up, we always had that feeling of it's us against everyone else, because we didn't really have all that many friends to celebrate with. So every Porto win, trophies or just a championship game, it always mattered a lot, and it just molds who you are. And obviously nowadays I live in Manchester in England. Mm-hmm. Still a Porto fan. I can't support anything else. I've tried. I've had season tickets for both City and United just to see if I could grow attached to it. It's nice. I love watching football, but none of them are Porto, so it just doesn't happen for me. But I still go. I still go to the games. It's just, but my heart is not in it. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes complete sense. It would be like any of us moving to any other city and trying to, throw your weight behind whoever their team are. You know what I mean? You're always going to be, your first team is always going to be your first love, for lack of a better term. Did you go to the game last night? Out of interest?
No, obviously because personal reasons that we've spoken about it. Mm-hmm. The trip to Porto was going to be my one away game.
Sure.
To see Porto, but I have to be honest, it was tough seeing, obviously, because I do love being in Manchester, so it was very difficult to not be there
Mm-hmm.
because it was my team and my city, if that makes sense, playing together.
Mm-hmm.
But I still watched the game, obviously, and with friends. And it was a cracking match, we have to say.
Yeah, it absolutely was. It was good to see Porto put up a fight. It was just a shame that they couldn't get the win in the end. But as you mentioned earlier on as well, I think what makes Porto sort of quite interesting, and when we'd done the episode on CUF, the club from Barreiro,
Yeah.
with Miguel Pereira. Miguel is also a Porto fan. He's from Porto, as far as I'm aware, and he did mention at the time that there's not really locality within Portuguese football. You support one of the big three. There's not really such a thing as local fan bases for the most part. But because Porto is obviously up north and Benfica and Sporting are in Lisbon, there's always been this sort of unique identity surrounding Porto where, you guys are a bit more isolated. You're from the north, therefore you've got a bit more to prove about yourselves.
Obviously, because I'm now living in a north city as well. To you living in Glasgow, we're south. I get that, but still.
No, yeah, exactly. It's probably the same kind of dynamic as well. So, there's always been quite an interesting, I don't know, fascination, I suppose, of Porto from me, and I think this match played into it as well. The UEFA Cup Final, and of course, I think at the time, obviously, when Mourinho came in charge, I don't think any of you guys would have expected what he would go on to achieve.
No, because if you look at the Champions League history, it's not been made for smaller clubs. And we're the last ones do not belong to that giant group to win it. And it's getting harder and harder. So obviously winning the Europa League, UEFA Cup at the time, and then the Champions League the following year, nothing short of a miracle, if we're honest, because that squad was built on no money and a lot of willpower, basically. And to then go face other teams with a lot bigger budgets, and we still managed to pull through those 2 years in a row. It just shows the mental capacity of that team. And obviously with Mourinho at the helm, because he was the main reason that belief got instilled in that group of players.
Exactly. It was absolutely incredible. And I mean, the run for you guys up to the final as well was nothing short of incredible. Obviously, pretty easy up until the quarterfinals when you said Panathinaikos, and things got a little bit leggy. They took you to extra time. And then the Lazio game happened, which, again, I don't think anyone expected whatsoever. So just before we kind of get onto the final properly, tell us about the semi-final with Lazio, because I'm going to speak a little bit about Boa Vista as well.
Just one note though, because I was at that game against Panathinaikos at Porto, and we lost at home. And at that time, Greek teams didn't lose at home. It was basically impossible to go there and get a win. And at the end of the game, obviously, we're all disappointed because we lost a game we dominated. And Mourinho just looked at the stands and just told us to not worry about, because they were going to come back with a win. And that's what happened. But at that point, winning in Greece was a big deal. Now it's a bit different, obviously, because Greek football has fallen behind a bit.
Yeah.
But at that point, I can't remember the exact stat, but if I'm not mistaken, Panathinaikos went through many, many years without losing a European game at home. So it was nothing short of a miracle, basically. And then obviously we went semi-finals. We played Lazio, and that game, that 4-1, I was there. So because my dad I'm a diehard Porto fan, and my dad probably is like 2 steps above me when that comes to that sort of thing. So, and he made sure that we went to every single home game, and that game that we won, obviously 4-1, it might be the best display I've ever seen by a Porto team, because that Lazio was very strong, a lot of great players, and they were doing well in the Serie A. So for us to beat them like that, and the thing is, that 4-1 was nice for them. That was actually a nice score for them in the end.
It was, yeah.
So it was just unbelievable, and it all starts with Vitor Bahia saving a penalty. It's just that goalkeeper was always there when you need him. So it was just amazing, to be honest, because I don't think anyone expected. Obviously, you always have hope, and you kind of feel like we're in it, so might as well try it. But beating Italian teams, especially with a score like that, it was just something that didn't happen. And so for us, it was just, I think for most Porto fans, especially my generation, that game is the game when it comes to display, because obviously we then won the final, and the following year we had all those displays in Champions League. But I think that's when Porto with Mourinho reached its peak. So I think it's just etched in everyone's memory, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean that's completely understandable. You've also kind of got this sort of background context, I suppose, where this is the era where Portuguese teams really started to kind of come to the fore a bit more, I suppose. Obviously, with the kind of previous decade or so, the country had really been building up its footballing credentials, if you like, and the national team had really started to come into their own as well at this point. But I think it was, I mean, obviously, Porto won the Champions League back in 1980, 1984?
87. 84 was the Cup Winners' Cup Final.
That's right, yeah. So I think a lot of people probably already had this idea of what Portuguese teams were able to do, but obviously with the kind of political context and the country having to rebuild after the regime, you've got all sorts of other issues there. And the teams had sort of fallen away for a little bit, and then out of nowhere come Porto. And as you said there, the Lazio result was flattering for them. Like it wasn't as if it was like a plucky hit in the counter-attack, score 4 goals with 4 shots type thing. Porto absolutely dominated them, and it was a huge, huge shock at the time because Lazio were, as you said, one of the darlings of Serie A. They were doing really, really well in the league at that point, and for them to fall to a result like that, where they were so badly beaten, it was massive.
Yeah, it was. It's just one of those games, that you just don't forget. Because I'm thinking you'll probably have memories about you winning against Liverpool 2-0 in this road to Sevilla. So I'm guessing that's probably your Lazio game, that one against Liverpool, where in theory a much stronger opponent and you just get it done. And there's no doubts about it. So I think every team that goes on for a strong European campaign needs a game where it's not about building belief, it's more about them feeling like they belong in that situation, where they feel like it's all right, we're here. This is a normal thing. We shouldn't be surprised anymore. Because obviously Scottish football and Portuguese football, we're not giants of Europe. We are aware of that. So we've won many things, both clubs, we know that, and we can put our history up against anyone, really. But we're still aware of our place in the pecking order. Yeah,
it's that kind of balance of we know where our place in the pecking order is, but when we're on the European stage and we perform and we go on a run, it's like both of our clubs' runs in this. We knew at the time that while people were shocked and it was surprising, we still deserved to be there at the end of the day.
And for us Porto fans, the fact that you beat Boa Vista to get to the final for us,
to be fair, and the thing is, I would never wish for it to be a Porto Boa Vista final because that would have deprived me of an amazing football experience. But that would have surely been one of the biggest finals ever in European competition. Surely that would have been incredible.
I'll be very honest. Boa Vista has a knack to make our lives difficult.
Yeah, they do. And I can imagine you guys would have been absolutely terrified on the lead up to it just because it was a derby as well, as would the case with any derby fan,
Yeah, I think with derbies, it doesn't really matter who's the strongest team or who has the best players. When the game comes, a lot of it is about belief. And for Boa Vista, their Champions League final is playing against Porto in many ways. So they would just go for it with everything they got. So we're very happy you knocked them out because that way it just makes it for a better final, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I think as well though, and again, there's context here because maybe people of a younger generation will not really know much about Boa Vista, but at this period, again, this is when they were a very, very strong team. This is when they were at the peak of their powers as well. They deserved to be in the UEFA Cup semi-final at this point. And the thing was, I think at the time, a lot of people were still looking at the fixture between Boa Vista and Celtic as being very, very evenly matched and quite difficult to call, despite the fact that, both teams were playing very, very well. Obviously, first leg, one each, which wasn't ideal. I remember watching the second leg. I'm not too sure why, because there's some games that I remember. I remember beating Liverpool 2-0. I remember watching that. The fixtures before that, I don't, I don't really remember that much. Again, I would have been about 6, maybe 7. The Boa Vista game, when Henrik Larsson scored quite late on, and it's just that kind of really sort of semi-scrappy, but he knows what he's doing, sort of dink round the keeper, so it's just out of reach of his hand. That's a very, very iconic goal to send us through to the final. And I remember just like everyone in my house that was watching that was of a Celtic persuasion just absolutely like going nuts. It was incredible. It was amazing to see. And of course, I was just kind of sitting there, not really knowing what was going on. But, I was like, oh, Celtic have won. Like, well, have we got 3 points? Are we going up the league? Like, what's do you know what I mean? So it was quite weird. And then, my dad kind of explained to me, oh no, you're going to the final of the UEFA Cup. And I was like, oh, that's class. Do you know what I mean? But it's one of those things that sort of sinks into your head, but you're not really sure why, but you just know that it's a big thing. And I think that's part of the beauty of growing up watching football as a child when you're really young, is that though you're not quite sure, it's just kind of pure, raw, instinctual feeling. And there's a beauty in that as well. You just know it's something that's really positive and really good. So obviously you go along with it. But again, and, having watched the game back, the highlights from it as well, Celtic deserved to go through. Like, Boa Vista, they had a couple of near misses, I suppose, and they did have a couple of good chances, but for the most part, Celtic were really, really comfortable in that fixture.
Yeah, I remember watching, because I watched both games, obviously, on TV. But I remember Celtic was clearly better, but that's just how Boa Vista does things. They just manage to make your life difficult. Even if you're much better than them, you're still going to have to fight for it. So those 2 games, they were very scrappy. You deserve to win. You were the better team, but it was very scrappy. But that's just how Boa Vista functions. Nowadays, not so much, unfortunately. The last 20 years are not being kind to them. But yeah, that it's just the way they are. It's just a team they will make your life difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were very stuffy. They were very physical, and that's coming up against a very, very physical Celtic team at that point as well. And yeah, I think that's spot on. They just try and make your life difficult and make it as hard as possible for you to get the win, while also trying to obviously hit in the counter. That was a kind of style of play at the time. But obviously both clubs managed to get through, and then it's a case of getting on to the final. So I suppose this is where we really come into things, and more importantly, you're going to share the spotlight for this one because you actually went to the game. So tell me what the build up to the final was actually like.
It's Sevilla, so hot weather, because that part of the world was blessed with sun, all the sun, basically. Well, I was 17, 18. I'm not much of a drinker, but I remember the Scottish supporters. My goodness, that was impressive. Thing is, because the Portuguese and the Scots are quite similar. Obviously, it's easy for me now to see it because I live in the UK. They're quite similar in a way of they treasure true happiness. So if they're happy about something, they're really happy about something. And I think for both teams, because it's been so long since they've been to European final, it was just a pure joy to be there for everyone, supporters and the teams. Obviously, I'm pretty sure the teams were more nervous or more focused in it. But the supporters, I remember all of us, both sides, just hanging out together because it was just a moment of pure joy. We knew history was being made, whether we win or lose, both sides.
Yeah.
And also because the Portuguese and the Brits do have a very strong connection. There's always been good relationships between both sides. So you get sun, football, and alcohol, everyone's going to get along. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, a match made in heaven, literally. So was there any question about whether or not you were going to this game, or were you and your dad set on going from the second you were going to be in the final?
So my dad is not much of a planner. He doesn't believe in making plans. But
okay, yeah, I get that.
He's just, I think it's just a generational thing. But he did tell me once we got through the quarterfinals, he just told me, if we get to the final, we're going to watch the game at the stadium. And I'm 17, 18. Obviously, I'm at that age, you're perfectly aware of everything that's going on. Yeah. But it's still your dad just saying another crazy thing, because a stadium can only fit 50,000 people, and obviously there's a lot more people than that want to watch the game. But he managed to pull through. I don't know how. I've never asked him. I don't know where those tickets come from, but I'm not going to complain about it. But yeah, we drove down there, so I can't remember how many hours was that, but it was still quite a bit of a drive.
Yeah.
But it was special, because you're about to see one of the loves of your life, if not the love of your life. Let's be honest about it, and you just know this is special because at that point, obviously, we won the following year, but you just don't know if it's going to happen again. It's just not something. It doesn't matter who you are, maybe apart from Real Madrid, but they don't count anymore, to be honest.
Yeah.
All of us, when you go to a European final, there's that feeling of this might be it. So we need to enjoy it because there's no guarantees we're going to make it again. Now, we've been lucky, but obviously for you guys, not so much. So, and who knows when it's going to happen again.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's one of those, I think just because of the size of our clubs comparatively on a European level, if you're there at a final, taking it in and watching it, you need to enjoy every part of it because you genuinely don't know if it's going to happen again. And as you said, you guys have been lucky. You guys have been competent. You might disagree with me there and on the European stage. Whereas, to be honest, since that final, we've done very little in Europe, bar a few kind of big results, obviously beating Barcelona and stuff like that. But what does it count for if you're not getting through to the later stages of the trophy? So we've been really poor in Europe since then. But I mean, I think in terms of the build up to the final, the thing was, so at the time, contextually, again, my dad and his family are all Rangers fans, whereas my mum and her family are all Celtic fans, and that's where I got the Celtic from. But my dad is always more than happy for our Celtic family to be watching it at home. Like he's a Rangers fan, and he's always has been a Rangers fan, and his family are really, really like diehard Rangers fans. But he's not overly bothered when we're sitting watching it around the TV.
Are you sure about that?
No. No, honestly, no. I think he maybe just has to put up with it because it's my mum that has the final say, but you never know. So that's the kind of family divide, I suppose, if you like. So to me, it was kind of just not just another game, but I was like, well, we're in the final, so we'll play it, and then that'll be it, sort of thing. You're still quite young at this point. I remember my uncle going over. That was his last ever Celtic away game. Because he got quite unwell after it. And I remember, friends, other, friends of family and stuff like that, and their families all going over. And it was just like, at the time, I think that's when it really hit me, was when, like, went into school and there was like half of our class missing, and we were a very small class of 13, and I think there was like 7 people that went in. But then the school were just like, yeah, we've like, they all sent letters in and we all said it's okay to go. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where I think that's when it hit me. That it's like, right, this is bigger than what I think it is and what I'm aware of it as being. Like, it must be big if the school are okay with kids being out of school. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, just I think that's when it really hit me. Like, okay, this is big. So then, obviously, the day the final comes around, there's like massive preparations. Mum's cooking loads of food. There's a buffet on and stuff like that. And then literally, it's like cousins, second cousins, extended family that I didn't even know that I had, all congregate in the house, and all of a sudden there's like 30 or 40 people just in my living room, like gathered around the TV, and I don't know who half of these people are. Do you know what I mean? I've never seen them before in my life.
That sounds like a Portuguese affair.
Well, I think not to lean too much into the religious side of it, but of course,
it's the Catholic side.
It's the Catholic thing, exactly.
Oh, yes.
It's the Catholic thing, and that's where Mum's family came into it. Do you know what I mean? It's the extended family, and Catholic family. There's all about 3 names. It's all Michaels and Bernadettes and Kathleen's. You know what I mean? So I was getting mixed up with the names, and yeah, it was just, the thing is, so outside of that, it was really, really brilliant and special because it just felt like a big party at the end of the day. Like, if we weren't able to be there, then there was still something happening in the homes of all these Celtic fans across the country who couldn't make it. And I can imagine in the bars as well, of course, something that I was too young to to be anywhere near at that point. But it was a complete party atmosphere. And I remember when the game was getting kicked off and everything was just starting, there was a lot of chatter, obviously. There was a lot of patter, a lot of, good chat and funny things being thrown around. And then when the teams came out, I remember there just being this silence that kind of came down on the house and everyone just stopped talking. And there was this tension and you could really cut it with a knife. But, of course, in the stadium, that was completely different, wasn't it?
Yeah, the atmosphere was insane there. It's still one of the loudest stadiums I've been in terms of just the supporters, because I think everyone knew there's history to be made. So that's why the game was so open, because teams just went for it. Because I think they both realized this is our time to make history. Because you won the Champions League, well, the Cup, Europeans Cup at that time.
Yeah.
And we won it as well, but it'd been some time between those trophies and obviously this final. So I think everyone was just like, we need to make history. We need to take advantage of this situation.
Yeah.
So everyone was very, very excited. The supporters, even the teams, you could tell the players, even the players on the bench, they were raring to go, really. Like everyone was like, give me a chance. Give me a chance. I want to do this. I'm pretty sure a lot of the supporters on both sides were thinking, if you need a left back or right wing, I'll play. I'll do it.
They probably were as well, yeah. And I think there was actually an extra element of it for us as well, because the Celtic goalkeeper at that time, Robert Douglas, who played in this game, and I believe he played in Boa Vista as well. He's actually from the town that I'm from. He went to the school that I went to and a lot of my family members went to. So there was that kind of added element for us as well, for a lot. And I should have mentioned it the last time I spoke, but it was the guys were all like, oh, we want to see Big Rab. We hope Big Rab does okay and all this kind of stuff, So that was a kind of added element. There was a very local aspect to it. And of course, at that point, there's still quite a few Scottish players in that Celtic team anyway. Obviously, Paul Lambert playing. And I mean, to be honest, if we didn't have Henrik Larsson, then that game would have probably been an absolute drubbing, and it wouldn't have had the dramatic ending that it did. But of course, you guys go in 1-0 up at the break, and at that point, you must just have been in absolute party mode.
Oh yes, it was insane. The thing is, if there was one player on your side that everyone feared, was Henrik Larsson.
Oh yeah.
That man has never seen a goal he couldn't score.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah,
he was unbelievable, and obviously because a couple of years back, he was the main opponent with Mario Jardel for the Golden Boot.
Yeah.
So they kept, if Larsson scored 40, Jardel will score 39 or 41, and they kept going at it for years. He was one of my favorite players. Him and Petrov, I really liked him. He was a fabulous midfielder.
Yeah.
You've always had some players that I wouldn't mind at all if they played for Porto. That never really happens. If I can recall, I don't think we ever made a deal between us.
No, not as far as I can remember. No.
But you had some really nice players. But yeah, as you were saying, obviously we scored that goal and everyone just went mental. Also because it was Derlei, and he was one of our favorite players. He was a special one. Not so much in terms of quality. Don't get me wrong, he was a very good player. But we loved Derlei so much that in his later years, so after he left Porto, he played for Sporting and Benfica. And we don't hold it against him. That's how much we like him.
Yeah.
Because he was just special. Obviously, he then scores the final goal, and it's just... I'll be very honest. Once a year, I'll rewatch the game. And I obviously know the score. I was there. And when he scores, there's a tear that pops in my eyes because it's just so special.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to say that I can understand it, but, sadly.
I hope this is not causing any trauma.
Thankfully not. The thing is, though, and this is part of what heritage is, it's memorial and it's remembering the feelings that you felt at the time. It's called phenomenology, but I won't go too much into the in-depths of it, but it's all very intangible. And it's all very much about remembrance and nostalgia and that kind of thing as well. But I think it attests to the fact how open it was, that obviously you go in 1-0 up at the break. The mood in the house at the time, I remember being pretty grim. because up until that point, though it had been a very open game, Celtic hadn't done very much. I don't want to say that we were the poorer team, but I think Porto had edged it at that point, and everyone at this time knew what Porto were about. They knew what their style of play was, and they knew that Celtic were up for a difficult task. And I suppose it's that kind of thing where it was like the unstoppable force versus the immovable object almost. But of course, obviously, Porto came out on top in the end, but then we come flying out the traps in the second half, and Larsson eventually gets his goal in the 47th minute, which was cracking. Everyone seems a little bit more upbeat then, and then I suppose there's a bit of a chaotic 10 minutes after that, isn't there?
Yeah, you have a period of the game there where I'm not sure anyone knows what they were doing.
Yeah,
it just felt very, very chaotic from both sides. And obviously because Celtic was quite physical at that point. It was a very strong physically team, and Porto wasn't. It just wasn't about it. And the one midfielder we had, Costinha,
yes,
I wouldn't say could match your physicality, but he was our strongest midfielder by far, and he subbed off very early in the game. So that was something that caused some issues to control the midfield, because we just didn't have the physical tools to do it. If you look at Paul Lambert and Neil Lennon, you just know you're going to it's just, you know what's coming.
Yeah, you know what's happening. You know what's about to happen.
Yeah, those are two players that even Scott Brown is proud of. It's just like, it's just physically strong players. Again, nothing wrong about it, is because you need them. But it made the game more difficult than it should have been.
Yeah,
because,
I mean, that midfield three of Lennon, Lambert, and Petrov is, you know, as you said, you know what you're getting with it.
Yeah, and the thing is, even Petrov, because obviously you look at him, he was the most skilled out of the three, but even him was strong.
Yeah,
and usually with skilled players, you don't really think about that side with them, but even him could do it. That's why he played in the Scottish League, and it was amazing. Because let's be honest, if you're going to play Scottish football, you need to have that side about you, or at least put up a fight. Try to. But yeah, I'll be very honest. You're probably not going to like what I'm about to say. I would say most Porto fans were very confident we were going to lift the trophy.
Yeah,
it's not being disrespectful. It's not that. It's just, if you look at the players on both sides in their careers, there is quite a gap, because if you look at Porto, Carvalho then goes on to be one of the best defenders ever in the Premier League.
Yep.
And we all know about Deco, and Maniche. So you knew that there was a gap in terms of skill. It was just a matter of actually being able to win the game, because you just never know. And obviously you had Larsson up front, and you had Chris Sutton. That boy has never seen a centre back that he's feared of. It's just amazing. I remember looking at him, because obviously it's funny, because up to that point, I've never seen Celtic live, and it's very different seeing a player on TV and then seeing them in person. Obviously at a distance, because you're in the stands, but it's like, I remember seeing Sutton and Bobo Balde, and just thinking, oh my goodness, what is this? Wait, this is going to be horrible.
Well, the thing is, though, and just on your point that a lot of people were considering Porto to be the favourites, what a lot of people, well, not so much forget, we're reminded very often, but what a lot of people out with Scottish football seem to forget is that despite the fact we made it to the UEFA Cup Final, this was actually a trophyless season for Celtic. Do you know what I mean? And it was like the season before. The season before that, we were absolutely blowing teams away. Again, Martin O'Neill's team at the peak of its powers. And we were still doing that to some extent in this season, but we ended up trophyless due to a couple of really, really bad results and a couple of injuries as well. But, you know, at the end of the day, this was Celtic's last chance for silverware in the season. And although going to Seville made great memories, obviously there was the UEFA and the FIFA Fair Play Awards for the 80,000 travelling fans who went over and made it a great atmosphere. I mean, out with that, I don't think you can really look at this season as being good for Celtic, you know?
Yeah, I know the feeling, because obviously big clubs, whenever they go without trophies, it doesn't matter how good they played, how well they played, you still feel like it's just not good enough. Like, it's the same with Porto. Like there's been seasons where they've played well and now win, and you look back on them, and it's just you just can't
No.
see them as good seasons. So obviously with Celtic, it's the same thing because you're in it to win. Obviously, the domestic competitions, European football, we'll see what happens with it. To be honest, but you can't complain because the last quite many
Yeah.
years have been good for you.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's we've certainly made up for it. The thing is though, despite that trophyless season, that's really much been an exception to the rule. And I think I might be right in saying one of only two trophyless seasons, or one of three trophyless seasons since the turn of the century, which is incredibly impressive. So we really have been the most dominant team in the country since the turn of the millennium. So that's obviously something to be proud about. But I think you had that kind of chaotic 10 minutes in the game. The game's tied at 2 each, and then there's a lot of near misses. There's a lot of chances that should have been in. The game gets very edgy and very dramatic. But eventually the game goes to extra time. Going into that period of extra time, what was your feeling at that point? Because at the time, and watching the game back, I actually felt that going into extra time, Celtic were the team that had the upper hand.
Yeah, but again, it goes back to the physical side because you are a stronger team, and Porto was out of legs. You could tell most of the players could barely run at that point. That's why Mourinho tells Derlei to just stay up front, just stay there, because he always tracked back to help defending. But he just told them, if we're going to score, it's going to be through you. Just stay there, and we'll make it happen. Because the team, you could tell they were on their last legs. There was no more energy left. So I think that was the only point where us Porto fans felt like this might actually go wrong for us. And that would have been obviously quite sad. I'm happy it didn't. I know, I feel sorry for you, but I'm happy it didn't.
No, that's fair. I wouldn't decry you that. Obviously, it was a momentous occasion. I think the Mourinho story wouldn't have been as good without this UEFA Cup win, because obviously then you followed up the next season with the Champions League win. But there's so many other subplots to this as well. The fact that a lot of the players he actually brought from his previous club era where he managed, and a lot of people weren't sure if they'd be able to make the step up, but they did. And then he took a couple of them over to Chelsea with him eventually as well. But of course, extra time, things are very tetchy as opposed to the beginning of the game, which was very open and both teams going for it. At this point, both teams are running out of legs. They're starting to get a little bit more conservative with how they're playing. And then sadly, in the 115th minute, Derlei pops up and it's game over.
My dad used to say, anytime you play a European final, the first half, you try not to lose. The second half, you try to win. And then if it goes to extra time, you just start speaking to the gods. That's what he used to say. But the funny thing is, he was always quite confident about it. I'm more analytic when I watch the game. So, and obviously you could tell both teams were starting to get nervous. And when teams get nervous, that's when mistakes happen.
Correct.
We just didn't know which way it was going to go. And obviously because you had Henrik Larsson, even if you're not playing well, one ball through, he can make it happen because he was like that. He could always make something happen. So we had to be aware of that at all times because there's not been that many players like that where half a chance, you're losing. Everyone knew if something was going to happen from your side, it was going to be through him or maybe a corner because obviously the Celtic players were much bigger. So you're always going to have an advantage on that side.
Sure.
But everyone got really nervous. And it was just I say everyone, but then I remember there was a large group of Celtic supporters that they were on the stands. They were shirtless the whole game. The weather was inviting, so I'm not blaming them. They were shirtless the whole game. And they were so boisterous, so loud, so happy to be there that I think whether you won 5-0 or lost 5-0, I don't think you would have changed anything for them. I think they were very happy to be there, and it was just fair enough. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm happy we won, but if we had lost, obviously history then changes, and you just never know if then the Champions League win happens because that's just the way football is.
Yep.
But seeing your supporters there with us and the way they acted before and after the game, we wouldn't feel as bad if it was against someone else, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because before the game, the Celtic supporters they were with us, which doesn't really happen before finals.
It doesn't really know.
We were all together. We were all the same places, drinking and eating and singing and all that. And then, obviously, during the game, we will go our own separate ways because we got teams to support. But then after the game, they were still there. We had Celtic supporters celebrating with us after the game. Just because they were happy, they got a chance to go to European final. And to me, because British people see football in a different way from Southern European. So we both love it, but with Brits, if you lose it, it's not the end of the world. You're not so much prone to depression, let's call it that way, in terms of football. Yeah. While for us in Southern European countries, it is horrible. It's like, it is bad. That trip back home was a lot better because we won, because otherwise it's just been absolutely miserable. But there's so many details from that game. The ref was Lubos Mitchell.
Yes, they were Slovakian.
Yeah,
right?
Slovakian. So he worked years after this final. He worked as PAOK from Greece. He worked as sports director, football director, and chairman.
Yep.
And he's now the chairman of a Slovakian team. I think Tatran Petrov.
Wow.
So he clearly still likes the game. He's still connected to the game. But going back to the Jose Mourinho history, this is the game, this one and that 4-1 against Lazio, where I think him and the players, and obviously us supporters, feel like, I think we got something here. I think next season, because obviously we at that point we already knew we were going to win the league. The league was won, so we knew we were going to play the Champions League the following season. So there was a massive belief, like we might be able to do something special. Obviously, none of us is thinking we're going to win the Champions League because that's just not something that happens. But this was the game where everyone felt like we might be able to do something with this. And this with a group of players, I'm not sure if it's said all around Portugal, but around my area, whenever you get a player for basically no money, roughly translated, we just say that we got a player for a bag of balls and a sandwich.
Nice.
So those players, yeah, I know. So those players that Mourinho brought with him from Leiria, so Nuno Valente and Derlei, we won 2 European competitions with bags of balls and a couple of sandwiches.
That's fantastic, man.
Go on.
No, I was just going to say that's part of the story as well, though, is that the team, it wasn't patchwork, because I think that's doing what Mourinho done a massive disservice. He knew exactly what he was doing, and I don't think that can be understated. But there was a lot of players there that he'd brought from Leiria that a lot of people, as I say, didn't think they'd make the step up, and in a lot of ways, people didn't think they were good enough either. But then looking back on it now, they were more than good enough, obviously. And as you said, you got them for a bag of balls and a sandwich and managed to win 2 European trophies off it. So
can't complain about that deal.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I remember it was weird because even, when we'd have people round for cup finals and stuff like that, even if Celtic lost, people would still hang around for a little bit after it. But I remember after the final whistle went, I don't think a lot of my family actually hung around for the trophy presentation and the medal presentations and stuff like that. A lot of them did just go home, and it was only really my close family that stayed behind. But I remember the mood was grim. My dad didn't feel so bad. He was okay. He was a bit indifferent to it all. Indifferent maybe being a bit strong, but the Celtic side of my family were absolutely devastated. So I suppose the thing is, though, you've not got the same sort of feeling of going to the final, of having a full day in the sun drinking, so you are going to be feeling a little bit grim after it, aren't you?
Yeah, whenever you go to south of Spain, whatever happens in your life, you still feel great. That's just the way it works.
That's just how it is. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, as you say, the journey home for you guys must have been absolutely magnificent. And of course, I suppose this game, I mean, to the outside world, as opposed to internally in Portugal, this game really announced Jose Mourinho to the world, didn't it?
Oh yeah, because up to that point, Porto it's been a few years since we've actually done something special in Europe. Obviously,
Mm.
in Miguel is going to kill me because he's the historian, not me. In '93 or '94, we reached the Champions League semi-finals in
Yep.
a game we lost against Barcelona. So it's funny enough, not going back too much with that, but it's kind of lost that run in even Porto fans' memory. But that was our
Really?
yeah. It's very odd because obviously it's a Champions League semi-final. It's fantastic, but it has been kind of lost in history, even with us supporters. But so it was a surprise because I got family a bit all over, but that's just the Portuguese way. If there's a country, we'll have some family there. So for them, it was very surprising to like Porto is in a European final. Like it's just not. It's funny because after this one, we then Porto again in 2004, Sporting in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
It just starts happening quite often. Well, I wouldn't say often, but still.
Yeah.
But this is the game that introduces everyone. It's just if the thing is, you're probably not aware of this, but like Deco at that point had been playing for Porto for a few years, and he was not a big name. Obviously, in Portugal, everyone knew him, but he was not a big name. And then all of a sudden, oh, this guy is one of the best midfielders in the world.
Yeah.
It's just happened for him. So, and obviously, those guys that came from Leiria, no one knew them. Like, obviously, even for us Porto fans that we watch Portuguese football, like a player like Nuno Valente, was our left back. Yeah, we saw him playing for Leiria, and he was a decent left back. But we never thought, yeah, we get this guy and we're going to win European trophies. It doesn't even cross your mind. But it's funny because every time Porto has European success, it's usually with players that were, I wouldn't say kind of lost, but still in the domestic league, and we go get a bunch of them, 3, 4, because obviously this team also had Paulo Ferreira, which was another one. So it's always built on players that were not really doing it at the highest level in the Portuguese league, and then all of a sudden something just happens, and
it's players with a point to prove.
yeah, and that's also part of the Porto's DNA because we're not the team from the capital.
Yeah,
we are fully aware. So I hate saying this; it's painful to say it, but the biggest Portuguese club is Benfica.
Oh yeah, without doubt.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be painful to say it. And to be honest, we actually have more official trophies than them, and we have a lot more European trophies. But in terms of size, they are the team to beat. It's painful to say it, but that's true.
Yeah.
And the media is mostly based in Lisbon. So there's always been a media bias against us. So for a Porto fan, for the Porto team, it's always been a bit like us against everyone else. So to see us achieve this and then everything that came after this, it was just like a slap in the face of everyone. And look, I think every football fan that loves this team, that is having to fight external factors, not just football, it makes our trophies more special to us.
Yeah.
Because you know how hard it was to get there. Like, just so you to have an idea, I remember even today, it's been 20 years and it still annoys me. So obviously in Portugal, we have 3 sports newspaper, and they're basically, it's just football. That's the main thing they deal with. And the cover on one of them was not the Porto win in Sevilla. It was an interview with a Benfica player.
Incredible.
But that just fuels our fire, That
Yeah.
just makes us want it more and more. So if anything, thank you for being like this with us, because we kind of love it, to be honest.
No, I mean it does play into it as well, and I think that's probably where our clubs differ and our mindset as fans differ. Because of course, and don't get me wrong, I'm aware of it. I'm not. I am of course a Celtic fan, but I'm not a partisan Celtic fan when it comes to like the Twitter debates. I do acknowledge that a lot of the smaller clubs in Scotland probably do get it a bit worse off referees when they play against us. And I'm also aware that there is a huge mainstream media bias towards clubs from Glasgow, but mainly Celtic and Rangers, out with, kind of regional media such as like the Edinburgh Standard or the Highland Courier and stuff like that. And part of that is just kind of historical. If you're going to be a football club based in Scotland's largest city, then you're gonna attract the amount of supporters that you do, particularly if you're a club like Celtic or Rangers, where you have the heritage aspects attached to it as well. That's not to kind of look down on the heritage elements present within other clubs, but you can't deny that they are stronger within Celtic and Rangers for reasons positive or negative otherwise. So, I guess that's maybe where we kind of differ, where, I'm fully aware that we are the biggest club in Scotland and soon to be the most successful club in Scotland, and that it does come with certain media biases, but there's always going to be that Celtic Rangers divide in the media. But, right now there's been a couple of people coming out and saying that Aberdeen could lift the trophy this year and present a title challenge. And at the moment, they're certainly making a good case for it, but we'll see how far they get, and we'll see if they drop off before that does happen. You never know.
My dad, for some reason, always liked Aberdeen. I have no idea why.
I think maybe, again, a generational thing, but I would imagine it's probably because of their European trophy themselves when they were under Sir Alex Ferguson.
He just likes random teams. It's very odd. He also likes Newcastle.
Oh, fair enough.
Although I think that one is because of Sir Bobby Robson. I think that's the reason.
Yeah, that would be fair enough. I think
that's the reason.
Aberdeen are one of the only clubs with a 100% record against Real Madrid, and the last team to beat them in a European final, so maybe it's that. Yeah. Jonee, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you very much for coming on the show, and it's actually the first time we've kind of spoken in person as well. It's been absolutely brilliant. Is there anything else that you want to add just before we finish up for today?
So obviously, when you're playing Champions League this year, and we're playing Europa League, so as a small challenge, you reckon you're going to qualify the top 24?
No.
Really?
No, I don't think so. I think
let's forget the last game.
You can't do that to me now, man. I think after the Slovan Bratislava game, I would say yes. After Tuesday night, I think Celtic in Europe will do what Celtic in Europe does. It's really difficult to tell. I do think the draw that we got was pretty favourable. I don't think you can write anyone off at this level, and I think that's what a lot of Celtic fans done over the last couple of weeks, was they wrote Dortmund off. And Tuesday night was a massive, massive wake-up call to a lot of fans that, our players still can't compete at that level. And in many ways, that's okay. I wish it hadn't been 7-1 as bad as it was. But we need to pick ourselves up and move on. If we do want any chance of qualifying, I think we might scrape through to the playoff phase, or whatever it's called. Whether or not we then reach the round of 16, I don't know. I personally can't see it, but we'll see what happens.
Fair enough. Yeah, the new system, the new league system, I'm not a fan, to be honest.
I'm not too against it. I think it makes it a bit more interesting, but it's just a little bit confusing now. What about you? Do you think Porto have got a chance to make it through?
I expect so, but I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen. It's just, there's Porto. Obviously, we got a new manager now, and the team is still very confusing to see them play. I think even the players are a bit confused on what's going on. So anything can happen. But I think it's important, because you were talking like, so obviously Celtic supporters downplaying Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah.
But I saw a lot of my friends doing the same with Man United, because obviously they've been absolute rubbish, let's be honest about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But there's still a gap, a very big gap in terms of skill in the players on both sides.
Of course. And
even, are they going through a horrible phase? Yeah, they are. But the skill is still there. It's just a matter of if it's going to happen or not. Because yesterday, obviously, not going too much into it, I was watching the game and I kept thinking, is this team the best United ever? No, of course not. But half of those players will start for Porto. So it's important to be aware of that. I didn't get a chance to see the Dortmund Celtic game, but the thing is, it doesn't really matter if they're going through a rough stay. It's still Dortmund.
Yeah.
Like, how many Celtic players would staff for them?
None.
Yeah. So, like I said, us supporters of not giant teams, at least in terms of money, it's sometimes it's difficult to balance it out. The fact that we feel very confident about our team, but we need to be aware there's a gap, and that gap is increasing.
Yeah, it very much is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a shame, but it's football, isn't it?
Yeah, it's football at the end of the day. It's how it's always been, and it's how it always will be, sadly. But yeah, no, that's the thing. It's even in these games, I think, obviously, it was the way that Mourinho was kind of honing his tactics at the time, but he ultimately won the UEFA Cup and the Champions League with Porto through being pragmatic and being realistic, but also filling his players with belief. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what we've struggled with over the last sort of few seasons in Europe, where we've been playing extremely well domestically. Obviously, Ange Postecoglou, one of the greatest eras supporting Celtic of my life, but in Europe, he wasn't going to change his system of play. And that meant that we didn't qualify when we probably should have. And on Tuesday night, I think Brendan Rodgers was quite naive in the way that he put the team out. But that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
Jonee, thanks very much for joining me once again.
Thank you for the opportunity.
No, honestly, you're welcome on any time. It's been absolutely, it's been brilliant speaking with you. It's been an absolute pleasure. To all of our listeners, thank you very much for tuning in once again. If there's a topic that you want us to cover that's related to football history or heritage, then please get in touch. You can DM us on X, that's @_footyheritage, or you can email us at hello@footballheritage.co.uk. You can also check out our website, which is where all of our fantastic written content goes, such as from Jonee. And if you want to contribute again, just get in touch with us. But for now, Jonee, say goodbye.
Bye to everyone, and thank you once again.
And it's goodbye from me as well. We'll see you all again next week. Goodbye.